Welcome to Spirited Discussion, a Spirit Island podcast. Today, we have Episode 2, Power Card Bingo, Part 1. There was a spirit, had a draft, and bingo was its name-o. Hi everyone, I'm Kalen.
I'm Alex, and that was a little corny, but you know what? All right, that's good. That's good.
It was extremely corny. We can, who knows if we'll use it or not.
The audience definitely will. So we are here to talk about some power cards. They are a major and minor part of the game of Spirit Island. You see many of them across your journeys, and so we wanted to talk about them.
Yeah, in order to do that, we're going to be looking at a subset of the power deck today, and we're going to be doing this in a random order. We're playing a bingo with the power decks.
Yes, we weren't really sure how we wanted to cover it. We certainly couldn't cover all the cards in one day, in one episode. So let's just do it completely randomly. Kalen, do you have any general axioms when it comes to drafting minor power cards?
I mean, I sort of am a subscriber to the zero-cost powers typically are overpowered a little bit, and I like to go for those when I can. There are often situations where I like to draft one-cost powers, of course. Mainly, I'd say, though, looking and making sure that you're actually drafting for effect rather than just drafting for elements. Because while elements are very important and win you the game, sometimes drafting for effect can win you the game better.
That's very fair. Also, it's just not particularly fun if you're looking only at the elements and nothing else, because then everything's just on rails.
Yeah, I think some spirits tend to be a little more prone to needing their elements, whereas some spirits can really flex a lot more easily. Especially spirits with very high card play counts can be a lot more flexible.
Obviously, these cards are kind of hard to judge in a vacuum because depending on what's going on the board, depending on which spirit you're playing as, some spirits have a lot of energy and not a lot of card plays. Some spirits have a lot of card plays and not a lot of energy. So instead of giving them like defined tier rankings, we're kind of going to split each of these cards into one of three rough categories, being always happy to see, sometimes happy to see, and rarely happy to see. Because there's not actually any card in the game that I'm like, for the minor power deck, that I'm like, ugh, get this card out of here. There are definitely edge case scenarios with certain spirits or certain situations that even my least favorite minor powers, I'll be like, yeah, no, I'll take that card.
I will say they did retire Growth Through Sacrifice.
Yes, but that is on our list. We might still talk about it. So we're going to see how many minor powers we can get through today. We're going to spend the first half of the show talking about them and the second half talking about the major powers. We won't get through all of them, but yeah, are you ready to dive in?
Let's do this.
All right. So up on our first card, we are talking about Delusions of Danger. Great name.
Yeah, it's an interesting card. It's a one-cost power, which, I already expressed a little bit of a bias against, but this is one that's really interesting because it has sun and moon and air element. Now, I think having all three of those elements, even before I talk about the text of the card, is actually really relevant because of something not in this episode, which is the event deck. Three of the most brutal Branch and Claw events, one of them is aided by sun, one of them is aided by moon, and one of them is aided by air. And you always want to pay for those. And so Delusions of Danger, in my mind, is sometimes a card that I like to take, even if I'm not going to ever plan on really playing it. Or maybe just playing it for its second effect. Which I probably should actually say what the card does.
Yeah, that might help.
One cost fast power, range 1, targets any land. It can do either push an explorer or generate 2 fear.
It is a fairly weak effect. For one power, I would say, or for one energy. But it is something that's kind of always relevant when you think about it. A lot of times you want to just move that one explorer out of the way so they don't build the town. And if nothing else, the fact that you have 2 fear, right? And you can always target something. You're always within range 1 of any land, right? So it's something.
Yeah. As a pure fear generating power, it's a fairly overcosted. So I don't like to have to use it in that mode. But again, if I end up with it in a draft where nothing else is relevant, I will take it and sometimes just hold on to it, maybe generate 2 fear here and there. I also really like to play against England a lot, and this power I feel is lackluster there, where you just get the adjacency builds.
That's fair. There's a lot of different power cards that can kind of push or remove explorers that's not huge. And for 1 energy, it's like, maybe I'd want a little more.
Yeah. I wish this power was a little more pushed, maybe. Just because it's definitely in my sometimes happy to see, but it's borderline rarely happy to see.
Yeah, I think I'd put it in sometimes just because of the applicability of it. Also worth noting, this is from the base game, Spirit Island.
Shall we move on to the next power?
We have Elusive Ambushes.
Ooh, elusive ambushes. I like this one a lot.
This is a card from Branch and Claw. It costs 1 energy, and it is at fast speed, gives you sun, fire, and water. At range 1, and target land has to have Dahan. You're either doing 1 damage or defending 4.
So I think that part of why I like this power so much is just defend 4 is almost always good, especially in a land with Dahan. You're just generally going to want to be able to do that. I find I don't tend to use the 1 damage mode all that often, but there are some funny edge cases, like with the Horizon Spirit devouring Teethlurk underfoot, where it turns into 2 damage. In a land with Dahan, suddenly it's a lot more appealing.
It's always relevant, again, like the previous card, unless there is no Dahan on your board, or the Dahan have really, clustered up somewhere unuseful. At the very least, being able to pick off an Explorer is completely fine. But yeah, Defend 4 is a nice place to be at. If you have a town and a city, you're protected.
Always happy to see for me.
Yeah, I'll put that there as well. All right, next card.
Our next card is Gold's Allure.
Ooh.
Gold's Allure is a 0-costing power. It has fire, earth, and animal elements. Slow, range 1, targets a mountain only. Gather an explorer and a town, add a strife.
I love this card. This card is great.
So this is one that I feel like is actually not my favorite, just because I like it for being a 0-cost power, but I don't like the effect as much. I feel like it doesn't actually... It can be really, really powerful, but it also can feel like a total dud sometimes.
I do have to say, a lot of my love from this card just comes from how thematic and flavorful it is. It has great art of this dude just, absolutely coveting some gold right in front of him. The fact that it only affects mountains ties into its theme of gold. And the fact that it brings explorers and towns, but also brings problems and strife. I think just from a thematic standpoint, this card is amazing. In terms of playability, I like Strife. Strife is just nice to protect you, and the fact that this card can move both an explorer and a town, and it can gather them from different places, can set you up really nicely for the next turn. It can clear 2 lands out of a possible build or explorer.
Absolutely, yeah. The ability to gather an explorer from one land to stop a build, while also gathering a town from another land to stop a ravage, is really strong.
Yeah. Now, obviously, this is also a card that's going to depend on what board you're looking at. If you're looking at something that has a more central mountain, great. You have more options of where you pull. If your mountains are more on the edge of the board, you're a little bit more out of luck.
Yeah, I feel like one of my criticisms of this card is that I always seem to end up with my mountains as terrible dump lands. And so if I have a mountain that already has invaders and blight in it, or if both of my mountains especially already have invaders in them and at least one of them has blight, this card loses a lot of its appeal because it's like, oh, well, I suppose I could keep making my terrible land worse, but also I might need to deal with that ravage when stage 2 hits.
That's very fair. I think I'm somewhere between an always and a sometimes on this card. There are mitigating factors. Obviously, you also have to be within range 1 of a mountain too. But you gotta respect a minor power that can put a strife down, because it's not a ton of minors that can do that.
Absolutely, yeah. And special props to this on Volcano, who can then bring it in town and explorer into their volcano to blow them up.
Completely fair. I'll put it in sometimes, though. I do just love the card from a flavor perspective, but I do see your point that it's one of those cards that I think when you get it going, when you can prevent potentially 2 builds off of this, you feel really good. But then there's going to be times that this card kind of whiffs.
Absolutely. For me, I think it's rarely happy to see, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to take it. It's just, it's going to need to be the situation needs to be almost perfect for me to want to take this card.
Okay, next card. So we have Reaching Grasp. Oh, this is an interesting one.
Ooh. Reaching Grasp is a fun card.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's something. It's a 0 energy card from the base game that is speed of fast, and it can target any player. It gives you sun, air, water, and target spirit gets +2 range with all their powers.
So this is one of those that doesn't really do anything on its own because it is purely a support power, and so you don't actually impact the board when you play it, and that feels bad.
Yeah.
On the flip side, +2 range can sometimes be exactly what you need to get a player to throw some assistance from one board to another board. It can also be something where Ocean's Hungry Grasp really likes this for a couple of reasons. Not just so it can reach inland lands, but also so that it can use all of its range 0 drowning powers in any coastal land as long as there's a presence nearby.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that this card really shines when it comes to 0 range powers, like innate powers or what have you. A lot of cards are kind of balanced so that you can only affect where you are, and for some spirits, being places is costly. Some spirits can only be certain places. So for those spirits in those situations, this could be really great. But I'm going to be completely honest, I basically never take this card in my 2-player games.
I think that's totally fair, honestly.
Yeah.
Unless it's the right spirit and like the right player count. Mm-hmm. I think this power gets better in larger games, but even then it's still somewhat lackluster relative to a lot of other things. There are other range boosting effects. Volcano has some, Sunbright Whirlwind has one, that are much more powerful than Reaching Grasp. But Reaching Grasp still exists, and it still can be useful.
Something interesting about this card when I was researching is that apparently it boosts every range arrow on all of the other cards. And
yes.
It's not just the range, technically. Like, if there's something in the text box that says, within one of this, blah, 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 it'll also give it that as well.
Yeah, I had not really understood that until actually fairly recently. And that gave me some new appreciation for this with some other powers like Bargains of Power and Protection, where suddenly you're giving way more to Han, defense, and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I really, I respected the cards in the game. I think having, especially in the minor deck, having effects that do these kind of unique things that maybe aren't always useful, but like are different, right? It's not just, kill an explorer or push a town or whatever. I think it's cool that it's there, but it's got to go in rarely for me personally, just because I know for a fact I very rarely use this card.
Last thing I'll add before I also put it into the rarely happy to see category, for all I'm trying to talk it up, is that the art for Reaching Grasp, I believe, features a prototype of a spirit that turned into 2 spirits, specifically Vengeance and Mists. But this one is sometimes affectionately referred to as Blobby.
That's completely fair. It looks like a cotton candy spirit with tentacles, I guess, and a glowing
Pretty
heart.
much.
I don't know. But yeah, cool art. Definitely have to agree there. Okay. What do we got next, Kalen?
Next up is Gift of Living Energy.
Ooh. Our first gift.
Yeah, our first gift. Gift of Living Energy is a 0-cost power. It is fast. It targets any other player. It targets any player, not any other player. It targets any player. And it gives sun, fire, and plant elements. Target spirit gains 1 energy, +1 energy if target spirit is not yourself. And if you have at least 2 sacred sites, target spirit gains +1 energy.
So what does that actually mean?
So basically, if you target yourself and you don't have sacred sites, you get 1 energy. If you target someone else, they get 2 energy. If you have sacred sites, both of those numbers go up by 1.
Right, so it's a max of 2 energy for you, 3 energy for someone else.
And this is a card that outside of solo, I am almost never playing on myself. So this is definitely one that I like to see in multiplayer games, and I really like to see it on my teammate.
Mm-hmm. In any situation, it's not going to hurt, right? It might not move the needle greatly. It depends on, obviously, what spirits you're playing with. If they have big energy gains, maybe you don't need to get this for them. But anyone else, it's like, yeah, sure, who wouldn't love another 2 energy or 3 energy?
Absolutely, yeah. I do think also this is a really interesting power for a couple of spirits in particular. Keeper of the Forbidden Wilds, it's perfectly on element, and it allows, if you draft it on turn 1, to do all kinds of broken builds with Keeper, because suddenly you break your energy pattern. Additionally, being a 0-cost power with fire, it's really nice on Lightning Swift Strike. And Lightning Swift Strike usually has the sacred sites in order to get the final +1 energy. So whether they're fueling their own minor spam strategy or a teammate's, it's really good on Lightning.
Obviously, if you're in a rough situation on the board, card is not going to really help you because a spirit getting an energy that turn is not really going to immediately help much. There are a few cards that maybe that could help, or an event that maybe you'll need energy to pay for something. But even though it's a fast power, it's not one that's like, it's not an immediate benefit generally. So I think, I don't know. Where do you put this card?
This is one that I'm always happy to see, pretty much. I love to take it if there's nothing else in the draft, because getting energy banked for future turns so that spirits can play majors they couldn't otherwise afford, or can delay their reclaims potentially by getting to play slightly more expensive minor powers. It's one that I'm just always happy to see in my draft. It's not one I always take, obviously, but it is definitely up there for me.
You know what? That's completely fair. I'll put it in the always as well. It's just always nice to see a card that can always be useful, basically.
All right, what do we have next?
Savage Maw Beasts. Great name. Great name. This is another card from the base game. It is a 0-cost slow card that only gives you fire and animal. It has a range of 1 from a sacred site. Targets any land, and if the land is jungle or wetlands, 1 fear and 1 damage. If you have 3 animal, 1 extra damage.
This is a pretty straightforward power in some ways. I don't always like to see this one, but it has some really interesting niche use cases.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, I just talked about Lightning Swift Strike a little bit. Any 0-cost power with fire is nice on Lightning, especially a slow Sacred Site power that can be sped up and helps ping explorers and generate fear.
But any card that does nothing, if you're not looking at the right lands and you don't have the right elements, I don't know.
Absolutely,
it's definitely a more situational card.
Yeah, it's very situational. I feel like most spirits are not going to get the 3 animal threshold on it. There's some obvious exceptions. Sharp Fangs, Many Minds probably can do it, but a lot of spirits just aren't going to have the elements to actually get that 1 damage, and so this is usually ping an explorer and a jungle or wetland also get a fear.
Right. Yeah. I did want to mention, so I'm going to mention Magic the Gathering. Hang on. Hold on, everyone. In Magic the Gathering, the designers talk about how they design cards and then they kind of tweak things. They have knobs that they can tweak. So, like, they'll have a general effect for a card that they like, but in playtesting, they might find it's too powerful or not powerful enough, and they'll make it cost more or less or whatever. Spirit Island kind of has a similar sort of card design thing where you could make a power fast or slow. You could make it cost 0 or 1. Those are basically the only options for minor powers. But one of the interesting metrics is that most of the minor powers have 3 elements that they give you. However, there's several of them that only give you 2, and then a few others that give you 4 or more. I kind of find that interesting that they decided to tweak it so that there's less elements on this card. Like, do you think that says anything about this card design?
I think it says that they were overcosting damage early on in the Spirit Island design, honestly.
Fair.
I think Savage Mob Beasts could have a 3rd element, and it would be totally fine. I would particularly love for it to have another sun element on it, but, you know, that might not be the best or the most balanced.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could have gotten away with putting a 3rd element because it's so situational. It's Sacred Zone, has to be jungle or wetlands, and then, you know, maybe if you have 2 extra animal, you can do 1 more damage. What your best case scenario with this card is you could get a fear and kill a town.
Which is pretty good for 0 cost.
It is, but it's at slow. It is also at slow. It's kind of like, they kind of like tweaked every knob they could to make this card less powerful. I think this is a sometimes card for me.
Yeah, definitely sometimes for me as well. It's so situational that it's hard to say higher, but I don't think I dislike it enough to put it in rarely.
If you have the threshold, 1 damage plus, you know, potentially fear and damage if it's in the right area, or just 1 damage anywhere for free, it's not the worst.
Next up is Song of Sanctity. Song of Sanctity is a 1-cost power that has sun, water, and plant elements. It's slow, it targets at range 1, and it only targets mountains and jungles. If target land has explorers, push all explorers. Otherwise, remove a blight. So this is the first of several powers that remove blight, but only situationally. There's a cycle of these for, I think, every pair of land types, but I might be misremembering. But this is the mountain jungle one.
Yeah. The thing that I don't like about this card is that because it's at slow, the way Explore works, you have no idea where explorers are going to be. So, unfortunately, you could end up with a situation where, yeah, you're going to play this card, you're going to remove that blight, that's what you want to do. Oh, but there's going to be an explorer there, and hey, maybe pushing that explorer is good, right, so they don't build there, but maybe you really needed that blight removed. I don't really love that it's just kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah, I think this is one of my least favorite of the blight removal powers, if not my actual least favorite of blight removal powers. And the one like edge case that I really like it and enjoy it in is against France because of the extra explorers. Suddenly, pushing all explorers is a lot better than, like, we looked at Delusions of Danger earlier. Pushing one explorer doesn't do as much when they get two explorers on a land.
Right.
But even then, it only targets mountains and jungles, so that only matters if you play it on a turn when they explore mountains or jungles. And since it's slow, you don't know whether that's going to happen or not.
Yeah, and I mean, truthfully, the way drafting works in this game, where you're always looking at 4 cards, I just kind of feel like I'd be hard-pressed to get a batch of 4 cards where I don't find at least one card more useful than this one. There's lots of cards that push around explorers, if that's what you want to do, and at fast, too, which is better, generally. And then, yeah, the blight removal, hey, blight removal is good, it's helpful, but it's only on 2 lands, and like I said, you have very little control. Obviously, if you've isolated or you've moved all your towns and cities elsewhere, maybe you know that there's not going to be an explorer there, but otherwise you're putting a lot of it up to fate, and I'm not about that.
Yeah, I think this card has its uses, but for me it's definitely rarely happy to see.
Same as well. Okay, next card.
All right, next card.
Speaking of isolation, but not the kind you're thinking of, Call to Isolation. It's a 0-cost fast card at range of 1. The target land has to have a Dahan, and it gives you sun, air, and animal. And what it does is either push 1 explorer / town per Dahan, or just push 1 Dahan.
This card is amazing. I love this card.
Okay.
It's a 0-cost power. It has really good elements. Part of why I love this card so much is I believe it's in the base game.
Yes, it is.
And it is half of what you, or 2/3 of what you need to threshold Vigor of the Breaking Dawn, and it has Dahan movement built into it. It is ridiculously strong for that weird edge case alone, but also pushing one town or one explorer or town per Dahan can be an incredibly powerful control effect, especially if, for example, you have Ocean in the game. This is just a power where I like every part of it. I think we talked a little bit about Savage Maw Beasts. It felt like they tuned all the knobs down a little bit.
Yeah.
This one, I feel like they left them at neutral or tuned them up a little.
Yeah. I have to say, I do applaud the fact that many of these minor powers have 2 modes to them. They have an or even if they don't have an or, it'll be like that previous card where there are 2 modes depending on whether there's invaders there or whether something is there. I just massive props to the game designers for just kind of always giving us a little bit of choice in what we're doing. And I think this is decently powerful. Being able to push a town or more than 1 town even for 0 cost at fast can really move the needle quite a bit.
I've played this card on River Surges and Sunlight, and right after you use River's Bounty to put 3 Dahan into a land, and you suddenly shove like 3 towns out of it, it feels amazing.
Yeah, that's very fair. And of course, the spirits that care a lot about Dahan, your Thunder Speakers, your Heart's Vigil, those cards like this just kind of go up in value if you have a lot of Dahan carrying spirits, because that push 1, even though it's not a big deal and it's kind of the secondary mode on this card, sometimes you really badly need it just to get yourself out of a situation or get 1 more Dahan somewhere.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then with those spirits, you end up with some kind of bunched up Dahan, so you can really make full use of this card. Yeah, I agree. I think it's an always pick, or an always happy to see, I should say.
It's certainly not an always pick for me, but I am always happy to see it in my draft.
Yes,
unless I was, playing with Thunder Speaker and I got it instead of them.
Mm-hmm. Or all the Dahan died. Womp womp.
Or all the Dahan died.
What do we got next, Kalen?
Next card is Encompassing Ward.
Ooh.
Encompassing Ward is a 1-cost power with sun, water, and earth elements. It is fast, it targets a spirit, and target spirit provides defend 2 in each of its lands. I think this is an interesting power. I've grown more sour on it as I've played more of the game. And some of that is I think this is an absolutely amazing power at lower difficulties when a widespread defend 2 tends to have a large impact. You can sometimes solve two or more ravages with this card alone. But I feel like it tends to fall off a lot faster than other defend powers because, a higher level Sweden or something that just gets so that there's more than 3 damage in a land, either by forcing extra invaders onto the board with Brandenburg Prussia or England. Those kinds of things just make this feel a lot more lackluster.
Potentially, yeah. Now, if you have a spirit that's good at getting its presence all over the board, I still think even at higher difficulties it can be good. Just having that little extra defend. Sometimes the event card gets you 1 extra defend or something that can really push it. But I do agree that the higher difficulty you go, the less useful this card is. It's a little bit more of kind of a supplement to anything else. And using more than 1 card to protect a land from ravaging is generally not where you want to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, but hey, it also goes up with if you have spirits that have extra card plays, like lightning, which is featured on this card. If you have a spirit like that and you have extra card plays, and provided you have the 1 energy, you can kind of save things. Like I said, even incidentally with random events or fear cards, kind of like carefully fixing things. But I do also agree that high level Sweden, this is like, oh, cool, we can prevent 2 of the incoming 12 damage. Great. So I think I put this at a sometimes.
Yeah, for me it's down at rarely, but I think that it used to be at sometimes. I've played it enough times that I don't like the effect anymore.
It's not encompassing enough for you. Let me ask, what defend number would make you put it into always?
Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think if I would put it into always if it was at 3. It would definitely go up to sometimes if it was at 3. Okay. I think that might be busted enough that just because I feel like defend 3 is a lot stronger than defend 2 because it gets rid of a bunch of edge cases where the event deck increases invader damage in your typical single town plus single explorer ravage.
Right.
Which right now Encompassing Ward only barely solves that ravage, and so suddenly you're opening yourself up to edge cases.
Interesting.
I think that, certainly at like defend 4 in each of its lands, that would be ridiculous. So
yeah.
Any defend 4 power is amazing. So I think I'd have to say defend 3. I would be much happier with this card, but I also think that might be
okay.
I'm not good enough at balancing games to be sure, but I think that might even be too much already.
It is one of those just super situational, depending on how many. Like, if you only have 2 card plays, you're not really happy to play a card like this as one of them. But hey, if you're playing with 5 other people, right? You take this card and you know that, like, okay, you could do something.
Absolutely.
Someone could use this, right? Because it can be any spirit. But okay, let's talk about the last card for the minor powers today.
Yeah. Last card we've got is Weep for What Is Lost. Weep for What Is Lost is, I believe, from Jagged Earth.
You are correct.
So Weep for What Is Lost is a 0-cost power. It has fire, water, and animal elements. Slow, range 1, must target a blighted land. 1 fear per type of invader present. Push up to 1 explorer or town per blight. I joked before the episode that I wouldn't have much to say about Weep for What Is Lost, and now it's the last power, and I'm trying to decide whether I actually do have anything to say about it.
Yeah, it's an interesting card, is what I can definitely say about it. I think I can say blanket, like, the Jagged Earth ones are kind of generally the more interesting ones. They used all of the more basic kind of like push around a Dahan or push around an Explorer. A lot of that stuff was used up in the base game. So, but hey, you could get a lot of fear out of this card.
Yeah, three fear for 0 energy is a good deal.
Yeah, especially because it's 3 fear plus you're at least pushing 1 thing generally.
Absolutely. The one place where I kind of feel like this card has some self anti synergy is that if you're targeting a built-up land that has all three kinds of invaders present, you might not want to be pushing things out because you're setting up to deal with that land with a big power or something like that later on.
True.
And so it can potentially, like, if you have a blighted land that's about to ravage and you can handle a 4 damage ravage but not a 6 damage ravage, it's a lot more interesting. But that's pretty situational for me.
Yeah.
It does have perfect elements for Vengeance as a Burning Plague, so that's cool.
That's fair, and I mean, kind of on theme for that too, with the blight.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you're doing really well, or it's early game and there's not a lot of blight, the value of this card goes down. The less lands you could potentially target with it. I mean, it could potentially be one of the most like restrictive, at certain points in the game if there's just not a lot of blight, or if somehow your blight's kind of been consolidated. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm looking at that potential 3 fear for 0, and I'm like, I mean, that could be good, but I mean, how often are you getting that? How often is it going to be 1 or 2 fear, or potentially even 0 fear? If you have no explorers or no invaders anywhere where you have blight, that's 0 fear. So
I mean, in that case, you're just playing it for elements. So hopefully those elements were worthwhile.
Rarely.
Yeah, I'm rarely happy to see this card. When I am happy to see it, it's a very interesting game. I will say that.
What are the odds that you're not going to see 3 more interesting powers, more useful powers than this one? And it's like, yeah, you probably will. So, okay, that's our minor discussion. We got through a whopping 10 cards. Yeah, were you surprised at how much you had to say about each card?
A little bit, especially for What Is Lost, because I really was like, I don't know that I have anything about this card.
That's one of the things when I was reviewing all of the cards to kind of like get opinions on them. I do find that there is just like a decent variety in what you get. Like a lot of them kind of have similar effects ultimately, where it's like, push an explorer or do 1 damage or whatever. But the way they go about it by changing like what target lands or what elements they give you or how you do that, right? Is it based on Dahan there? Is it based on, which land you pick? Is it based on whatever? It's just really neat. I love this game. It's a great game. All right, well, we were going to take a short break, and we will be right back to talk about some major powers.
Yeah.
And we are back. So we talked about the minor powers a little bit.
Yep.
Now we are going to be doing the same random down the list sort of thing with major powers. But before we start, I think we got to talk about major powers. Minor powers are free. Obviously, you have to use a growth to get them, but they don't cost anything once you've selected them. But major powers come with a lot more baggage. You have to forget a card, and they are also there's a lot bigger of a range in energy that they can take up. They are between 2 and 9, although only one of them is 9. So you got to be a little more careful. You could theoretically end up drafting 4 cards that are like 6 or more power, and a lot of spirits cannot handle that much energy. So what do you think? When do you take majors?
First thing I want to say is that I've seen someone run the numbers on it, and the odds that you get something that costs, I think it's 5 or less, are really good in a typical 4-card draft. So like, you're rarely going to get stuck in that 6 and up only. But yes, if it does happen, you laugh and cry a little bit.
Very true. I looked it up. It's about half the cards are 2 or 3 energy.
Yeah.
The other half are 4 through 9. And there's a good chunk of 4s as well.
Yes. So I think maybe it was 4 or less. But so generally I like to look at majors as if after gaining my energy for the turn and getting energy from whatever growth option I was going to take, I would have at least 3 extra energy beyond what I was planning to spend on the cards in my hand already. That's when I like to start thinking about taking a major. Usually the idea would be that I'm going to take the major and replace one of those cards I'm playing, so I only need a buffer of maybe +3, because maybe one of those cards in my hand already cost 1. And then if I can get a 4 cost or less major, then I can sling it that turn. The other place that I tend to take majors is somewhat early in the game if I can, long before I intend to play it. If that, in the case of doing that, usually the reason I'm doing it is because I'm on a spirit that's going to be trying to threshold whatever major it gets, and I think we're going to try and talk about this a lot more in its own episode at some point. So I don't want to try and go into too much detail on it, but basically, taking a major early lets you plan more.
Okay, that's very interesting. So, yeah, this is why you're the pro, man. Because for me, majors are something that generally happen mid to late game. Now, of course, it really depends on the spirit. Like, I've been playing a lot of Darkness Down the Spine, and that spirit has this weird loop where you don't want to be reclaiming because you let all of your invaders out of your darkness. So that spirit wants to take as many minor powers as they can for most of the game, and I feel like other spirits are kind of in a similar weird boat where either they have a lot of card plays and they don't get a lot of energy, or they only get cards during a reclaim or something like that. I'm looking at you, Lightning. There's a lot of spirits that I just feel like you only get to see one or two majors, but then there's other spirits that you get to see more majors because they have not many card plays and a lot of energy. So I guess it really depends. My opinion on majors has kind of changed a little bit after reviewing the big list, because my thoughts were like, this needs to be a finisher card. This needs to basically end the game or come really close to ending the game. But after looking at how, like I said, about 50% of them are only 2 or 3 cost, I think maybe I'm going to be taking some a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. Worth noting also, all major powers have thresholds. Some are easier to hit than others. But, I think just kind of in general, when you're looking at majors, you want them to do things that minor powers can't. Like, one of the biggest things is dealing with cities, because most minor powers can't really do anything about cities on their own. Minor powers can't generally push cities, and if you're able to do 3 damage with a minor power, you're I don't know, thresholding it or comboing it or doing something shenaniganery, whereas majors can handle that sort of thing more easily.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, let's get on to the first major card we are talking about.
All right.
Oh, yes!
All right, first one here is Paralyzing Fright. Paralyzing Fright is a very fun card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is just one of those beautiful, beautiful cards.
So it costs 4 to play. It has air and earth elements. It is fast, and it is range 1 from a sacred site to target any land. Straight up, 4 fear. Invaders skip all actions in a target land this turn. Then, if you have 2 air and 3 earth, you get 4 more fear. This card is bonkers.
Mm-mm. Yes, it's base game as well, so I'm sure it was even more bonkers back when there was only, 20 major powers.
yeah. If you did 3 major power drafts and you saw half the deck, and Paralyzing Fright is in that deck, that can be really, really powerful.
Yeah, so for 1 or 2 player games, this is basically fear card generator. Whether you can hit the threshold, that's great. That's just great on its own. And then on top of that, you just skip all invader actions, especially later in the game. This could be skipping a Ravage and a build. I mean, this could be skipping all 3 of them theoretically.
I particularly like this power against England because of the high immigration tile, where sometimes you have a land that's going to build, ravage, build again, and then potentially do something else. But stopping all of that with Paralyzing Fright just feels so good. And the fear is really nice, especially if you're playing against England 6, where they get that first build twice if you don't have fear cards. Paralyzing Fright being able to generate 4 or 8 fear is massive in that matchup.
100%. Same thing with Brandenburg Prussia. The fact that you're going to be seeing a lot of those stage 3 cards a lot sooner means that they're going to be just coming at you hard all the time. There's a higher chance that any given land is going to get hit with both a Ravage and a build, or a build and an Explorer, or whatever. Just great stuff, honestly. This is definitely an always happy to see from me.
Yep, always happy to see here. I will also just add in my favorite story with this card is it was central to the only time I've ever beaten England 6 solo with River. And that was an amazing feeling.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's not a hard threshold to hit either. It comes with the air and an earth, so you just need 1 air and 2 earth. That's not hard. And being able to generate 8 fear, I mean, if you're playing a single player game, is that 2 fear cards?
Yes, that is too. Well, if it's
That's
England 6, it's like 1.6 fear cards, but
okay. But still, that's just bonkers. It's where you want to be, and you could definitely win games relatively easily by just looping this card over and over again. So yeah, love to see it. And hey, great art as well. I love those invaders. They are surely paralyzed with fright at, I want to say that's Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares.
I'm pretty sure that's Bringer. Which ironically, this card is not very good on Bringer, relatively speaking, because Bringer generates so much more fear with damage.
Fair. Okay, moving on to the next card. We have Unleash a Torrent of the Self's Own Essence. That is a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. I think of this one as, I don't know if there's a common fan name for it, but I like to think of it as Kamehameha, just because of the art. We've got Volcano shooting an energy beam out.
That's very fair. A chest beam, oddly enough. But yes, this is a 2-cost card that gives you sun, moon, fire, and water. It's at fast speed. You target yourself, and you can either gain 4 energy and forget a power card to gain 4 more energy if you choose, or you can pay X energy, minimum of 1, to deal X damage in a land at 0. If you have 2 sun and 3 fire, you may do both, and this is a card from Jagged Earth. I actually played this card yesterday.
What'd you think of it?
Oh, I love this card. It's a great card. And anything, I mean, I guess it's not that much. How many effects are pay X in this game? Like, not a ton.
That's a good question, and I don't actually know. I can't think of many others other than, like, there's an event card where you pay X energy to prevent a blight, where X is the number of discarded invader cards or something like that. But that's a little different.
Right. I mean, in terms of energy, what's nice about this card is because it only costs 2, if you're low on energy, you could get 8 energy out of this card. I guess a net of 6 by forgetting a power card. Or if you're a spirit that has just a ton of energy, boom, you just nuke a land that you're at. But what's really neat about this card's design is that it helps itself on a loop, right? You could play it once to get a bunch of energy, reclaim it with either a reclaim 1 that's been uncovered or just by doing a reclaim, and then next turn use it and get at least 8 damage out of it.
Absolutely, yeah. I also really like that if you have the threshold, this card is basically 2 energy, forget a card, deal 6 damage, range 0.
Yeah.
And that's really strong.
At a minimum, assuming you're not paying any extra energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Just dope card. I'm always happy to see it. Really, with a lot of these majors, the ones that are cheap and fast are generally just pretty nice to see. They may not be game winning, but I mean, they're definitely going to set you on track. And there's a lot of spirits also in this game that want to be where the danger is. Of course, it has Volcano right on the image, but yeah, there's a lot of spirits that your presence is already in locations that are getting built up like crazy. So being able to just clear it is great, and this synergizes awesomely with a lot of those other cards that just pull a bunch of things into one land.
One note that we mentioned earlier was range boosts affect range arrows in text boxes.
Yes.
And so this one actually can suddenly hit lands at more than range 0 if you have, a Reaching Grasp or, a Volcano looming high with 3 presence in a land. It's pretty nifty.
Yeah, very fair. Yeah, I'm always happy to see this card.
I think I'm a little more sour on it. I think I'm only at sometimes happy to see this card, and that's mostly because I feel like sometimes I get it at a point where I'm more going for a Hail Mary major, and it's not going to do what I need right away because I can't threshold it, and I don't have enough energy to just burn a bunch of invaders in one go.
That is fair.
That's a weird edge case. I don't know that that's really bad enough that I should be rating it lower, but I just haven't played with it as much, maybe. I should try and force draft it next time I see it, maybe.
I mean, if nothing else, it is nice to enable it for a future major, right? If you know you're going to take a major next turn, right, you can pay 2 energy now to get either gain 2 energy or gain 6 energy after paying the 2. And then it sets you up really nicely for the next major that you draft.
Absolutely.
And you can always forget it, too. So, okay. Next up.
All right. We've got our first nature incarnate power here, Transformative Sacrifice.
Ooh.
This one is a 3-cost fast power. It has 4 elements: moon, fire, water, and plant. It can target any player. Target spirit may remove up to 3 presents from anywhere on the island. Then for each removed presence, they take a minor power and play it for free. If you have 2 moon, 3 fire, 2 plant, before taking cards, they may also remove a presence from their presence track to take a minor power and play it.
Hey, Kalen.
This card is nuts.
I hate this card.
Oh, you hate this card?
I hate this card, dude.
Oh, tell me more.
Tell me more. This card. Yes. I think I said earlier that there wasn't really any minor powers that I'm like, oh, I strongly hate this. This card has frustrated me and gotten in my way. I think 3 times. I've played this card 3 times, removing the full amount of presents, all 3 presents, and it has whiffed so often. Because notably, you take a minor power, you don't gain it, you take it, which just means you draw it off the top of the deck. And it just sucks. It sucks. If you can hit the threshold, right, anytime you're removing presents from your presence track, that's great, like, that's good, sure, whatever. But, like, I've played this card, and it has whiffed and whiffed and whiffed. So, I can see how this could be good. But by seeing how it could be good, I have tried it, and it is just really, like, I draw these minor powers that just do nothing in the situation. There's too many minor powers in the deck that'll only target a specific land, or like an unblighted land, or a land with invaders and Dahan, or like something like that, and it's just, you draw them, and they're just useless.
So this is interesting to me, because honestly, I would like this power if it didn't let you play the minors. It might be, I might think it was not as good, but like if this card just said you can remove 3 presents to gain 3 powers, or take 3 powers to your hand, I would find that to be a cool power. And it might not be, I guess maybe I'm might be overestimating the strength of this card, because when I've seen it, I've had the opposite experience where at least one of the powers has always hit, pretty much.
Okay.
And it hasn't taken more than one of them hitting to have a positive impact on the game.
That's fair. I mean, I'm literally just gonna say from experience. By looking at this card, I could see how it could be really useful, obviously, because I've played it. But I think my problem is just when I get this card, I'm hoping for something to happen. I'm hoping for it to save us. And because removing 3 presents, depending on where you are or what kind of game you're playing or whatever, can be a big problem. That can severely... Because you got to think about that too, dude.
Yeah.
You're taking those presents away, and then you play those cards, and oh, now you have less presents. Like, you might not have a sacred zone anymore. You might not be within one of the wetlands or whatever. So... It kind of like works against itself. I don't know. I might be basing this just off of emotions, but I any card that I've played like 3 times, any major I've played like 3 times, and it really has been a problem for me, is not one that I can be happy about.
I get what you're saying. I think some of this might be, we talked a little bit earlier about our different philosophies on approaching majors. This is one of those that's really fun to see early in the game, not because you're going to play it super early in the game, although you might if you have a spirit that throws enough presents around.
Yeah.
But mostly because suddenly you're going to be able to take this huge jump in how many power cards you have between your hand and your discard pile. And that's going to drastically... Like, if you imagine Lightning Swift Strike maybe only removing 2 presents for this, but suddenly getting 2 more power cards, that's amazing. Because Lightning Swift Strike really, really wants power cards desperately.
Yeah.
And if you're playing it on, you're playing, a spirit that doesn't put a lot of presents out, if you're playing a spirit that only gets 1 presence a turn or even less than 1 presence a turn, like a Shadow's Flicker like Flame or something like that, this is going to feel a lot more lackluster.
Yeah. It's just going to be a rarely from me, to be honest. I mean, definitely, look, if I have the threshold and I can get 1 presence off my track, and looking at it like, at the very least, I'm just kind of getting minor powers, even if they're not useful this particular turn. Yeah, sure, that can be fine, but it's a lot of work to get to that threshold So yeah, I don't know. It's too finicky. It's not my playstyle, and it has severely gotten in my way several times. So it's gonna be a rarely from me.
I think for me, it's probably not quite an always happy to see. It is a sometimes happy to see. But that's, again, mainly if I draw it late in the game, I'm not super thrilled about it unless I know that I'm going to be able to, like, get a good chance of hitting the next level of a threshold on a teammate because I played it.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. To be clear, I am glad this exists in the game. I think it is an interesting, unique effect. I'm glad it exists. I guess it's just not for me, unfortunately.
And that's fine. I mean, not everything in this game is going to appeal to every player. You might not like Mentor Memory much either.
Fair. All right, next card. Where do you place it, actually?
Transformative Sacrifice?
Yeah.
It was sometimes. Sometimes happy to see.
Okay. All right. Next card. Ooh.
This one is Bloodrack Plague. So Bloodrack Plague is a 4-cost major. It is fast. It gives only 3 elements, water, earth, and animal. Range 1 from a sacred site, any land. You add 2 disease. Then for each disease in target land, defend 1 in target and all adjacent lands. If you have 2 earth and 4 animal, 2 fear, and for each disease in target land, do 1 damage in target or an adjacent land. This is another card I like a lot. So far we've pretty much only hit majors I enjoy, which is kind of weird to me because I feel like there's a decent chunk of the deck that I don't enjoy that much.
This is from Branch and Claw, by the way.
Oh yes, this is from Branch and Claw.
Yes.
This one, every card that has this kind of AoE defend is interesting to me. And as down as I was on Encompassing Ward earlier for just only doing defend 2, I feel like Bloodrack Plague has more utility in that if you target it on a land that's adjacent to multiple pairs of the same type, if that makes sense. So like if you look at like the central wetland on board C, it's adjacent to 2 sands, it's adjacent to 2 jungles, and if you start piling up disease tokens with Bloodrack Plague there, you're going to pretty quickly be defending 4 in both lands that are ravaging on your board, or defending 6, or defending 8 if you somehow manage to play it 4 times.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I don't really like the threshold. I don't think I've ever hit it other than like trying to artificially force it.
Yeah, 4 of the same element can be rough.
Absolutely. Certain spirits can do it, but I mean, I guess I haven't pulled Bloodrack Plague on Fangs in a game where I want to do it. So,
yeah, that's completely fair. No, I like this card. I think anything that can really kind of splash multiple tokens around is generally decent. You know, adding 2 disease, like even if you ignore the rest of the card, that's 2 builds that are not going to happen in a land, and that's not bad. That's not nothing at all. That can basically be cool. We've just solved that land for the rest of the game, or for at least a long while, and that's nice to see. 4 energy is not a crazy amount to do that, and then the addition of the defense in that target and all the adjacent lands is cool. And I gotta say, just it's a good feeling when you play a card like this, and like you can fix several ravages at once with just 1 card. Anytime you can do that is like, oh man, like it frees you up to do other things. So yeah, I like this card.
I think this is one that for me is probably I don't have any like fun stories about it, so I'm hesitant to put it in always happy to see, but I am probably always happy to see this one. It's not always useful, but it's definitely one I like to have in my drafts.
Yeah, I think I'd put it in the always. It's definitely like a borderline because it's not. This card is not going to win you the game. This card might save you in like a last chance, like, oh no, we're in danger. That defend 2 could theoretically save you, and of course it could be defend more if you're playing a spirit that can splash around disease in other ways.
Yeah, I was gonna say that you can just win the game sometimes with this card if you're playing Vengeance.
Okay, that's very fair. That's very fair. So yeah, so it's definitely in always then. And cool art, pretty rough that there's a plague going around that makes you turn blue.
Yeah, I don't want to know what that's doing to their blood, other than racking it, obviously.
Okay, next up, we have Terrifying Nightmares. Man, we're Terrifying Nightmares and Paralyzing Fright today. That's That's spooky. So this is a 4-cost card that gives you Moon and Air. It's fast, it has a range of 2, and it can target any land you want. 2 fear, push up to 4 explorers/towns, and then if you have 4 moons, 4 extra fear. This is also a card from the base game. Pretty simple effect for a major power. Not that that's bad, just not a lot of text on the card.
Yeah, it's a little quicker to the point in some ways. I do think this card is not as good as some of the other 4-cost major powers. I particularly love it if Ocean's in the game. It's amazing then. But 2 fear, push 4 things. I mean, I'm looking at River's unique power Wash Away, which is very good, mind you. But that's push 3 towns or explorers. And no fear, but it costs 3 less. It's also slow, so I guess maybe I'm convincing myself a little differently as I'm saying this.
I don't know. I think if I'm taking a major card and it costs 4, I want it to be better than just kind of pushing explorers and towns. You know what I mean? Like, if you're at the stage of the game where there's a city, this isn't going to do anything to the city. Like, and it also feels like a waste if you're doing it to just push like 1 explorer. But still, it can certainly save you from builds. 6 fear is nice, but getting to 4 moon, I mean, it's definitely doable, but it's not like a foregone conclusion, unfortunately.
Yeah, the spirits that can threshold this are not always the ones that are going to do the best with it. I think of like Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares has Moon on its track, plus an any element, and so it can do it even though it's usually stuck at 2 card plays. But then it has lots of other better ways to generate fear than just generating 6 fear with Terrifying Nightmares.
Yeah, I mean, this card certainly is no Paralyzing Fright. I think I would put it just in the sometimes because, sure, if you can hit that threshold, 6 fear is nice for sure, and it does have a nice range on it. And it's not super exciting, but yes, sometimes you got to push like 2 towns out of somewhere, and that will make a big difference going down the line. So sometimes
it can be really nice against France. Is one thing I would say, where you might be having a big stack of towns showing up or a big stack of explorers that you don't want to turn into towns.
Fair.
But again, I'm probably a little more cynical on the card than you even. I think it's in the rarely happy to see bucket for me, just because I like the card, but the situations in which I want to actually draft it are so few and far between.
Yeah, that's completely understandable.
All right, let's see what our next power is. We've got Vengeance of the Dead. Vengeance of the Dead is a 3-cost fast power. It provides 3 elements, moon, fire, and animal. Has range 3, which is pretty high. I don't think there's much that has range 3 or above.
I mean, you're definitely looking across the whole of at least one board there.
Oh, yes. Can target any land, generates 3 fear, and then after each effect that destroys town, city, or Dahan in target land, 1 damage per town, city, and Dahan destroyed. If you have 3 animal, damage from this power may be dealt into adjacent lands.
Also from the base game.
Also from the base game. This is not my favorite power. I
Nope.
I have taken it very rarely, and when I have taken it, it basically reads 3 fear for 3 energy. And it's fast. And I just desperately needed that 3 fear. And maybe the elements.
Yeah, it's kind of funny we're going from a pretty simple, straightforward major to one that's just like, this is... I mean, yeah, it's 3 fear unless you have combo pieces that can do things. And it's just like, with a major power, I want it to do more on its own. Like... Yeah, 1 damage per destroyed. It's just like you need another major power to really get this one going, and it's like that's not where you want to be.
The other place I could see it being useful is you have a land with a bunch of buildings and a bunch of Dahan, and there's enough Dahan that some of them are going to survive, but not all of them. And you can target that land, let the Ravage go through, but even in that situation, I'd much rather grab something that just defends the land than something that sort of helps me deal a little bit of extra damage in response to the Dahan dying.
Yeah, no, you got to think about the other cards because you always get 4 cards to look at. Or, I mean, honestly, you could have taken a minor power, right? If for the effect that this does, I feel like there's minor powers that are stronger.
Certainly, if you're just playing it for the fear, yeah.
Yeah, and then the threshold is like it helps. Like the adjacent land thing is cool. You could maybe nuke a land, right, and then use this power to do all that extra damage in an adjacent land. But then, like, what are the odds that you have an adjacent land that's like nice and built up as the one you're targeting? Like, I don't know. It's just it's too situational, and there's other better things. I put it in rarely.
Yeah, the only thing I would say that's cool about it to me probably is that the rules of the game actually have changed how it works since it was first printed.
Ooh, spicy.
Because originally in the base game, it could trigger itself.
Oh,
But then with the Jagged Earth rules update, it can no longer trigger itself. And so that is kind of disappointing in some ways because it makes it a lot worse.
Yeah.
But the other thing to note of this, if you ever are on the Spirit Island Second Wave Discord, there is an exploratory version of Vengeance of the Dead that you can try playing with, where they tried to buff it a little bit and make it work a little differently.
Well, all right. That's interesting.
But yeah, it's rarely happy to see for me.
We could be seeing a replacement of this card at some point, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, not exciting. Okay. Next up, Fire and Flood. Oh, another card I played yesterday. All right. Finally, we got an expensive one up in here. 7 cost. This gives you sun, fire, and water. It's a slow, and maybe uniquely in terms of the major powers, it actually, you target 2 lands. Like specifically target 2 lands. Not that it affects multiple lands, but it has to be 2 lands, and you have to pick the same origin land where you have a sacred site, and you target 1 within 1 and 1 within 2. And then you do 4 damage in each target land. Then, if you have 3 fire, plus 4 damage in either target land, 3 water, plus 4 damage in either target land. So the combinations you're looking at is either 4 damage in each land, potentially 8 damage in one, 4 damage in another, or you could potentially do like a maximum of 12 damage in one land, and then 4 in another.
12 damage is going to destroy a lot of invaders.
Yeah, for sure. I very much like this card. I was playing with Lightning, and they made this fast. So this was a fast way to win the game at fast.
Yeah, this is one of those that I really like being in the deck for sort of that Hail Mary type effect, where you just really need to grab something in the deck that's going to hopefully bail you out, and this one can sometimes do that.
For sure.
On the flip side, it costs 7.
Yeah.
And 7 is a lot of energy, even for a potential 16 damage. It's so expensive. I usually can't play this card more than once in the game when I draft it, and I really would like to be able to play most cards that I draft more than once.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. This has got to be a rarely happy to see for me. It occasionally bails me out, but there's also a lot of other powers that will occasionally that could bail me out in those situations usually.
Okay. Yeah, that's completely fair. From a game design standpoint, I just really I like that there's 2 different thresholds. Like, that's not very common, but I guess 2 different targets isn't
it's
either.
really cool.
So
yeah, having two target lands, 2 thresholds, and then being able to sort of mix and match where those thresholds apply is really cool.
Yes. But on the flip side, like you said, you have to have that kind of energy to even play this card. And theoretically, you could have a Sacred Zone that's just not convenient to 2 lands to do this with, and it would feel a big bummer to, cool, you clear out like a big built-up land, and then, you pick off an Explorer. Like, that feels like a big waste. So, I don't know if I want to give it some time. I think I agree with you rarely, but it's not getting a rarely as in I don't like the card. It's getting a rarely as in, yeah, it's just genuinely only certain spirits at only certain times of the game can really make use of this card. But the ones that can, this is definitely a game-ending card.
Absolutely. All right. Our next power is Bombard with Boulders and Stinging Seeds.
Ooh.
Got another Nature Incarnate one here.
Okay. Oh, and the last one was Branch and Claw. I got on you and I forgot to mention it. Oop.
So Bombard with Boulders and Stinging Seeds is a slow power. It costs 2 energy. It provides air, earth, and plant, and it targets up to range 2 away from a mountain or jungle, and it can target any land. 1 fear, 2 damage out of Badlands. If you have 2 air, 2 earth, 3 plant, 1 fear, 2 damage out of Wilds. I really like this power, but I also don't think I've played with it very much.
Are we sure this isn't a minor card?
Yeah, no, this is a really interesting one because it was kind of a design space that they never really looked at until Nature Incarnate of like, hey, what does a 2-cost slow major that just deals damage and fear get to be?
Yeah.
And how much can that do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the saving grace of this card is that it's 2-cost. If this was anything more, I would just instantly be like, yeah, this is just not worth it. But the fact that it is so cheap, and it's not 2 damage and a Badlands. And because it's so cheap, you could be playing it. You probably will be playing it multiple times. So then you use it on the same land, and suddenly it does 3 damage because of that Badlands. Like, okay, it's an interesting card.
Yeah, I really like it for its ability to build up a land and sort of chip down at somewhere that maybe you can't quite handle right away, but then make that land a little easier to chip down the next turn.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
This is one that right now I'm probably always happy to see just because I haven't gotten to play with it as much as I want. But I think that just trying to evaluate the card, it's probably more in the sometimes category, because if I'm really looking for a big effect, I'm going to be disappointed with this.
Yeah.
But if I'm drafting a major relatively early in the game and I see this, that's very exciting because suddenly I can build a game plan around it.
100%. Yeah, this is not the card you want to see, at the end of the game. It's not really even the card you want to see in the middle of the game, but absolutely, beginning of the game, 2-cost is cheap enough that basically any spirit can swing this. And I joked about it being a minor power, but it does do a little more than a minor power. And then, as you said, I mean, you could certainly work towards getting those thresholds, and once you have the threshold power of it, okay, 2 fear, 4 damage, a Badlands, and a wild? Yeah, that's solid. What do you think about its range? Like, does that matter? Like, is it just there to be, like, flavorful? Like half the lands, mountains or jungle, and 2 away, it seems like you could reach anything, really.
I feel like it's mostly just a reminder to players that they should try and be diversifying the terrain types they're in. So sometimes I'll be playing Lightning Swift Strike, and if I decide to grow into the same type of... If I start in the sands and I decide to grow into sands again, then suddenly I see this in my draft and I'm like, oh, I guess I can't ever play this.
Fair.
But that's I feel more of just it almost feels like a bit of a trap to me.
Yeah, like a gotcha.
Yeah, a spirit that can't easily get its presence into a mountain or jungle is going to have a bad time, but most spirits are going to be totally fine with it.
Okay. Yeah, I'd definitely put it in the sometimes. All right. We have Trees Radiate Celestial Brilliance. This is a card from Jagged Earth. It costs 3. It gives you a sun, a moon, and a plant. It is fast. It's range 1, and the target land is either a jungle or a place with no blight. It gives you 3 fear, defend 6, and then this turn, invaders in target lands skip the next build action. It's got threshold of 3 sun, 2 moon, 2 plant, 1 damage per sun you have.
I really like defend cards a lot, and this is a pretty solid defend card that also generates fear and can, in a pinch, be used to just skip a build. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the thing that stands out most to me about it is nobody knows how to target this card when they first read it, I feel like.
Did I do it right? Did I say it?
I believe you said it right, but then I've seen a lot of people, I think, who read the slash as an and. So I need a non-blighted jungle, and it's like, why would I ever play this card?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. I feel like they really go out of their way to just kind of try to give us every possible combination of, like, targeting and ranges. They just... I like it. I like that they do that. And I mean, thematically, it's like, okay, trees radiate, right? So in a jungle, there's tons of trees, even if there's blight. And then anywhere else, if there's no blight, then I guess the trees are doing fine. So I dig it.
The invaders haven't clear-cut the forests on the mountains yet.
Right.
Or whatever tree growth there happens to be there.
Yeah, all those trees in the sands. Yeah,
I mean, sands aren't inherently deserts, but they are more scrubland, and there's going to be less trees, and so if they're blighted at all, they're not going to have any trees to radiate such celestial brilliance.
All right, nerd. Anyway, what do you feel about this card?
I think this is a sometimes happy to see for me. I'm if I want a defend effect from the major power deck, I'm usually quite happy with it. Mm-hmm. the main issue is going to be that it can't target a blighted non-jungle.
Yeah.
And sometimes the land that I really want to defend is blighted and a non-jungle. So it's not quite an always happy to see for me because it just lacks a little bit of flexibility, but it is definitely one I'm sometimes happy to see.
Yeah, I think I put it in sometimes as well, just because of the same reason. It's mid to late game, depending on how you're doing with blight or what spirit you are. If you're a spirit that puts down blight or whatever, this card can really be limited in where it can be used. But earlier in the game, certainly being able to defend 6 is pretty great. 3 fear. It's one of those cards that just does kind of a little bit of everything, including damage if you can swing that threshold. Is there any spirit that really like goes crazy on the sun? That one from Horizons, maybe.
I mean, the card I think of with, or sorry, not card, the spirit I think of with this the most is probably someone like Keeper.
Okay.
Just because you get that sun element really early on your tracks, and then you have all of the other elements, I believe, in your starting hand.
Okay.
So it'd be pretty trivial to threshold there, and dealing damage per sun is something that Keeper kind of already does with its left innate, is per sun plus plant, I guess.
Okay. Do we want to do one more, or we call it there?
I think we should do one more. We've done 9, so let's do a 10th.
All right, go for it.
All right, our last one is Sea Monsters. Lonk, this one's for you. Anyway, I don't know that Alex actually gets that joke because I don't think you've spent enough time on the Discord.
Nope. Please try to refrain from your in-jokes on our podcast.
In-jokes in a Spirit Island niche podcast? What is this?
You're going to alienate all of those casual people that don't play Spirit Island that are listening to this podcast.
I'm sure I am, although it may or may not be because of the in-jokes.
Yeah, sorry, Mom. Okay, anyway, Sea Monsters.
Sea Monsters, it's a 5-cost major. It's slow. It provides water and animal. Targets at range 1 and can hit either coastal lands or wetlands. Add a beast. If invaders are present, 2 fear per beast, maximum of 8 fear. 3 damage per beast, and 1 damage per blight. If you have 3 water and 3 animal, repeat this power. This card is so cool.
It's from Jagged Earth, and yeah.
So, my favorite story with this card is probably the first time I tried to do a speedrun of England 6, which England 6 is not generally a fast adversary. So doing a speedrun of it is kind of hard. I pulled this on Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares, and I just hammered the same coastal land over and over and over again using Bringer's Reclaim 1 until I won by just emptying the fear deck. Because this was generating 8 fear from beast tokens. It was shadow destroying like 2 cities at a time for another 10 fear. I think it generated over 20 fear on one turn.
Wow. Well, I think really the thing that says it all is the fact that this card is actually a replacement of an outdated version of the card that reads the same, except they didn't limit the fear that you could do with it.
I think they also added. I think they also added the if invaders are present clause. I think the original version just said 2 fear per beast, but I'd have to double check on that.
Well, either way, it's roughly the same card, but they had to limit it, and it's still a good card.
Now, some of that limitation was because they were printing many mines, move as 1, which kind of upped the game as far as spirits being able to get beast tokens on the island. Thanks to many mines, sacred sites counting as beast tokens, having ever-multiplying swarm, being able to add beast tokens with its growth. It was just kind of nuts how good this card could be on many mines. You had 10 beasts stacked in a land with 1 explorer, and suddenly the invaders got 20 fear. That makes no sense.
Right. Because this card originally came with Branch and Claw when there was literally only one beast spirit.
And this is not a power that I usually want to take on Sharp Fangs.
No.
So,
yeah. This is a nerd note for me, but is there any reason why the target land says coastal or wetlands instead of coastal/wetlands? Is it to eliminate the confusion that people had with the slash icon?
You know, I'm not actually sure on that. I believe that Sea Monsters was printed before Trees Radiate Celestial Brilliance. And so maybe it was just a... Yeah, I have no idea why that's the case.
All right, good. I got you, game designers. I caught you on that one. Take that. But no, this is a good card. I like it. Yeah, I mean, I think you basically said it all. That being said, it is a little expensive.
It is a little expensive. There are definitely times I see it in a draft and I don't take it, even though I maybe could, just because I'm not going to be able to play it that turn. Or maybe it's one that I can play that turn, but I'm going to go to 0 energy if I do. And that's going to be really hard to handle with my reclaim next turn.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
I'm still always happy to see it, though.
I gotta put it in sometimes just because not every spirit wants that. And yeah, not every spirit's gonna has synergy with those beast tokens. Obviously, the ones that do, it goes up a little bit, but yeah, I don't know. And plus, I mean, you gotta also think about the times that, like, later in the game when there's more blight down is better. Earlier in the game, potentially not so much so. So I don't think it's always applicable, but it is generally a pretty good card.
Yeah, my choice of always happy to see is partially just because I love the card so much that I will take it in some situations even when I shouldn't.
That's completely fair. Okay, so we got through 10 minor powers and 10 major powers today.
Yeah.
I gotta say, definitely evaluating everything in preparation for this has kind of made me rethink a little bit about how I think about minor and major powers, and like it feels like I want to take those majors later in the game, but looking at it, it's like, yeah, there's plenty of them that are good early game, and like you said, statistically, you're not that likely to just kind of end up with a bunch of high cost things you can't use, but that threat's always there.
It is always there, and it does sometimes happen. Like, quite honestly, it sometimes happens. In which case, one of the nice things is you can always forget the major you just gained. If you really hate your major draw, just forget it and try again next turn.
Okay. All right. Well, let us know what you think about this concept of just kind of randomly reviewing them. We could potentially do a bunch more episodes on this, or maybe we'll never do it again. Let us know what you want.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. This has been Spirited Discussion, and we'll be back hopefully next week, and see you then.
Adios.